Steve Ratner, who served as the economic counselor to President Obama. Writing in the New York Times, Ratner uses 3 different modelers in each scenario. He says Trump wins. The FAIR model, it's called, says GDP and inflation combined with incumbency are the very best predictors. This model predicted 2 wins for President Obama in 2008 and in 2012 with shockingly accurate numbers, off by just tenths of a percentage point. Now look at 2016. This model was one of the rare outliers that showed then-candidate Trump winning the election at 54%. He won. He came out at 49% roughly. And he has him at 56% for 2020. But says the president's controversial personality may push that number lower again, as they believe it did last time, weighing a little bit on that economic strength. Now, the New York Times cites well-known economist Mark Zandi. He's another one who has a similar model. All 12 of his models show Trump winning. And Donald Luskin, who looks at Electoral College and also sees the same outcome. Now, remember, back in 2016, this skepticism from President Obama about Mr. Trump saying that he could bring back the economy.
Well, how exactly are you going to do that? What are you going to do? What magic wand do you have? And usually the answer is he doesn't have an answer.
And now frontrunner Joe Biden is using this strategy.
I know President Trump likes to take credit for the economy and the economic growth and the low unemployment numbers. But just look at the facts, not the alternative facts. President Trump inherited an economy from Obama-Biden administration that was given to him, just like he inherited everything else in his life.
So is that going to work? Let's bring in Jack Kingston, former Republican congressman from Georgia and Trump 2016 senior campaign advisor, Andy Puzder, former CEO of CKE Restaurants and author of The Capitalist Comeback, and Jehmu Greene, former candidate for chair, I should say, of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to all of you. Good to see you tonight. You know, it is very interesting, Jehmu. Let me start with you. When you look at those models, and this was all part of a story in the New York Times, Steve Ratner, who was with President Obama as an economic counselor, as I said, all saying that when they look at their models for 2020, they all point to a victory for President Trump.
It's too soon.
Well, that's true. But when you look at these indicators, they are also prior to when it was too soon. But, you know, based on the numbers and where we stand now, it looks like an uphill battle, frankly, for most Democrats, just given history in terms of these GDP numbers and incumbency and the numbers that these economists look at.
I think you're absolutely right. This is going to be an uphill battle. That's why these candidates on the Democratic side are operating in the marketplace of ideas. But here's also the reality that despite these very strong economic markers, Americans are still struggling financially. And so whichever Democratic candidate is able to connect with voters on the fact that most of them are living paycheck to paycheck, on the fact that most of them don't want their children going into massive debt just to go to college.
That may be. Okay, but let me just put up another number. This is not
economic markers.
We'll see. The Quinnipiac poll, 71% of the people they talked to said the economy is good or excellent. It's the highest that the Quinnipiac poll of this marker has ever been in the 18 years of polling. So, Andy Puzder, I mean, you know, what Jehmu's saying may be true for some people, and certainly you want to lift all boats, but almost 75% of the country, seems to think things are excellent or good, or 71%, I should say.
Well, even if you just look at GDP growth, if you look at the last 8 full quarters of the Obama administration and compare it to the first 8 full quarters of the Trump administration, there's a 50% improvement in GDP. If you look just post the 5 quarters post the tax cuts, it's up about 75%. Wages are up. They've been up 3% for 9 straight months, haven't been up 3% since 2009, and they're up 4% for retail workers, restaurant workers, hotel workers, and there are more job openings now than people unemployed. When President Trump took over, there were 2 million more unemployed people than there were job openings. Today, as of March, 1.3 million more job openings than people unemployed. There is a tremendous economic growth out there. The economy's on fire, and working and middle-class Americans are the ones that are mostly benefiting.
Well, Jack Kingston, you heard the candidate, former Vice President Biden. He's not on the campaign trail, by the way, this over the course of Memorial Day weekend. Some people asking questions about that. But most of the Democratic candidates are taking the tack that they change the subject. You know, when you talk a lot about the economy and you look at the numbers and you ask them, what do you think? Typically, in most of these conversations, they say yes, but.
Well, you know, the old candidate campaign axiom is if you can't win on an issue, you do change the topic. But that's why I think it's important for President Trump to continue talking about the astounding numbers that he has put on the board. And he has absolutely moved the needle and changed the lives of Americans. And, you know, as Ronald Reagan used to hit Jimmy Carter over the head with the misery index, which was unemployment plus inflation, the higher your number, the lower you are in terms of votes. But Reagan would always put it this way: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And Donald Trump is going to ask that question over and over again. And there's not a Democrat candidate on the ballot who can say, oh, yeah, I can do better than what you're doing. I talked to Congressman Bob Latta the other day from Ohio. He said one county that he represents has an unemployment rate of 1.9%. You can't get workers in many places across America because the economy is doing so well. So the economy is owned by Donald Trump, and he is going to make it the mainstay of the main message of his re-election.
I want to go quickly. Well, we'll see. As you say, Jehmu, it's a long way off, and we're going to have these conversations for quite some time. I want to get a quick thought from each of you on this, because I thought this was very interesting. When you look at what happened in Europe in the EU elections, and you've got Salvini, the candidate who was, you know, a big winner for Italy. Then you've got what's going on with Brexit, which looks like it could get a hardline Brexiteer, as they call them, perhaps Nigel Farage or Boris Johnson, the former mayor of London, to run things as a result of all of this. You know, this is going back to 2016 when President Trump was a candidate and Brexit won in the first place. Here's what he said. Watch this. We don't have it yet.
I think people really see a big parallel. A lot of people are talking about that, and not only the United States, but other countries. People want to take their country back, where they want to take their borders back. They want to take their monetary back. They want to take a lot of things back. They want to be able to have a country again. So I think you're going to have this happen more and more. I really believe that.
It seems like he was prescient on that point. Let me just go quickly to each one of you on this. Jehmu, will you start?
Well, I don't think we saw the landslide that was expected in some of the lead up. And just like we're saying, it's too early. These models sometimes don't work. But I do have to just say, on the economy, it's a lot easier to ride a grocery store horse than it is a bucking bronco. Trump rode that horse in front of the grocery store. Barack Obama rode that bucking bronco. American voters will see that with these candidates. But yeah, Europe kind of, you know, their system is as broken as ours.
Well, I mean, they seem to be making some similar choices when it comes to election time, Andy.
Well, it's not only in the EU, but you've seen the rejection of these large governments. You saw it in India with Modi. You saw it in Australia with the Liberal Party, which is the Conservative Party, winning. You saw it in Israel. You saw it in Brazil. And you saw it here. Now you've seen it with the EU. People are rejecting the super governments that focus on climate change, multiculturalism, and identity politics. They're rejecting them across the board, and they should.
Jack?
And Martha, what we also saw is the candidates who had clarity and were people of action did very well. That's one of the things that Donald Trump has always had: authenticity and a clear message, and somebody who will take action regardless of what the critics say. And I think that's what Americans want, and that's what the people in Europe showed us this week.
Well, you know, it's interesting when you go back to the numbers that we showed in the introduction, and I'm sure, Jehmu, that you will agree with this, that they said that, you know, although their markers, the economic markers the last time around, and they're saying this time around, showed that the president could win based on the economy and based on incumbency and a number of factors, that the personality factor and, you know, the controversial nature of the things that he says and tweets and all of that weighted on that number. So it pushed it from, I think, 51 down to 49, and that they said that could have a similar impact this time around. Jehmu?
Well, I think that President Trump is like many of the sports teams that I've rooted for over the years. He tends to shoot himself in the foot, and we have begun to see that even on the economy. The trade war is wreaking havoc on rural America. This was his bread and butter. They're not going to forget that. when it's time to vote for the next president in 2020.
What do you think about that?
Let me say this. I represented an agriculture district for 22 years. I've served on the agriculture committee. Sonny Perdue is right. There's a lot of good in this for Americans, farmers and Americans' heartlands, and they are going to say, you know, I might lose a little bit, but I'm tired of losing everything to China and some of these multinational trade agreements. They want somebody who's strong at the table, and they're willing to give the president the benefit of the doubt, and they're going to get behind him.
Yeah, Andy, Joe Biden said something to the effect of, you know, now the president is wrecking what President Obama started. He said that in the comment that we played earlier. And, you know, when you look at the trade situation and some of these points that perhaps some voters are going to wait, you know, down the road to decide whether or not they think this is actually working for them.
The Democrats have been so wrong in the end. They said that President Trump would destroy the economy. Then they said that the tax cuts were Armageddon. Then they said they were a sugar high when it turned out they were an Armageddon. But we were going to have a recession. Then when we didn't have a recession and GDP came in at 3.2%, they're now saying, well, it can't last. It must be trade. It must be something. It's not true. The economy is on fire. The American people are benefiting. President Trump will get credit for it. Absent some catastrophic event, he's in very good shape.
So how do you run as a Democrat, Jehmu, if those things are true?
Well, I think you take what Bernie Sanders is saying. He's focusing on the Americans running who are living paycheck to paycheck, who can't afford a college education for their kids, who are paying higher out-of-pocket costs for health care. It's really bringing it down to those pocketbook issues that the Americans, you can talk about the economy as a big umbrella, but they want to hear candidates talk about their lives and how it affects them individually. And right now, many Americans are struggling financially, and they're also struggling from the chaos of this president. They're tired of that. So I do think those markers where they have played a big deal before in the past in being correct, Donald Trump changes the game.
Well,
it's a whole new ballgame.
About the personality issue, Jack, what do you think?
Well, I do think statistics are completely contrary to what Jehmu is saying. Americans are doing better. Their wages are up. Their opportunities are up. Their families are paying off their debt. There's lots of great things out there. But there's 23 people in America running around trying to be the nominee who are very, very unhappy, and their message is one of misery. I don't know why anybody would want to go with them, because if you're the incumbent and you can say, I take credit for this economy, which he can, because one of the things that the Democrats always forget is the amount of deregulation that President Trump cut the red tape so that small businesses can grow. And Obama piled the red tape on them. But the truth is, nobody wants to change that. They're saying the economy's good. I am going to favor the incumbent, which is what the FAIR report, the FAIR economist, had said. So I just think he's in a great shape. Now, unfortunately, many in the media hate him. Many in the left can't stand the president. It's not good enough to oppose him. They have to hate him. But I don't think that that's going to be enough to get him out of the office. I think we're looking at 4 more terms, 4 more years.
I'm sure he'd be happy to take 4 more terms at this point. Guys, thank you very much. No, Jehmu was like, no. Jehmu and Andy and Jack, thank you very much. You guys, good to have you with us tonight.